This is Catherine. She's in lower elementary.
Yes.
Catherine's been here a long time. How long have you been here?
I don't know. I think.
I've been here a long time too.
Yes,
Not as long as her.
Yeah. So Rita and I have collaborated a lot for a while. We co-taught together. Well, Rita was my assistant first, and then she did her training. We co-taught. Now the classrooms are split, but there's a lot of collaboration between the different levels. So we have a personal relationship, and we have really worked on what is the best way to structure the program for the needs of our students. So right now we have 2 different classrooms, but as you'll see, we're going to talk about it tonight. In our Cosmic Education, we've been using this as a really powerful tool for the students to actually collaborate together.
Beautifully said. Any questions on that part? Of who we are and what's going on here? So we do know, lower elementary is 6 to 9 and upper elementary is 9 to 12 year olds. Just make sure that everyone gets the picture. They are, while you might say, well, 6 to 12 covers quite an age span, it does. And it's very visible when you see them outside, when you see a 6-year-old playing and a 12-year-old playing. Their sizes are quite different. It's interesting. But a lot of things get carried through from the younger child to the older child. And we're going to show you how a lot of that happens. Looking at the child as the center person and using their imagination to figure out where they fit into the world and how is everything interconnected. Because you might learn something about geography, one of our focuses for tonight, but then how does geography? Well, it connects to math, it connects to literature and reading, all language skills. It connects to science. How did the earth form? It's all science information. So everything is just so related to one another. And that is our cosmic education. It is how does that child look at the world? And can they differentiate the way we do in academic verticals? No. They're just like, I'm just doing this. They don't always realize that, oh, now I'm calculating what the difference in this temperature is. Oh, that's math? Well, I didn't, it just needed to get done, is what they're thinking of it as. And so we try not to compartmentalize everything into boom, 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 and put them in boxes, because it is all so related. And so we follow the child and try to say, if they are interested in something, we try to carry that on and use that as the trigger of their interest to learn about different things. And so a couple of quotes we wanted to share with you.
Can I add a little more? First?
Sure, yes you may,
Okay.
as I figure these slides out.
So with the cosmic education, the idea is, Maria Montessori's philosophy is starting with the big picture, with the largest understanding of who we are and how do we fit into the world. Because children in this plan of development are starting to ask those questions. They're starting to try and figure that out through themselves, into a classroom community, into their family community, into a larger community of their, whatever it is. It might be a sports team, it might be part of their town, then their state, their country, and then ultimately out into the world. And so cosmic education starts with that big picture and gives the children that frame to be able to hold it all in. And so that's really important because as Montessorians, our approach to teaching and curriculum is making sure that we are teaching and supporting all aspects of them in their human development, not just specific academic areas. And through cosmic education, that allows us to hold all of it all together in a holistic way, and also allows both us as the instructors and the children to be able to see how, like Rita had said, everything is interconnected. That you pull on one part of something, that you look at something else, and that has impacts through other areas of our lives, through our communities, through our, we'll talk about our geography, our biology, our human relationships, all across the world. And so we, as part of Montessori curriculum, there's 5 different great lessons, and each of those 5 takes one large aspect of what it means to be a human, and then everything else we do spirals and filters through that.
Right, and so on the screen now, those are our 5 great lessons in Montessori. The creation story, the timeline of life, the coming of humans. Then comes the history of writing and the history of mathematics. And so you can see they build on another. You cannot have the history of writing before you have humans. You cannot have humans before the world exists and before life comes to be. And we follow the whole timeline of life. And there were a couple of quotes that Catherine and I pulled together from Maria Montessori about cosmic education. The child will develop a kind of philosophy which teaches this unity of the universe. This is the very thing to motivate his or her interest and to give him or her a better insight into his or her own place and task in the world, and at the same time presenting a chance for the development of their creative energy. The child is both a hope and a promise for mankind.
And part of her purposeful choice of approaching education in this sense is that it's able to tie children into not only their place for themselves, but their place in the universe, which is the doorway into our peace curriculum. About what does it mean to be a human that shows up in the world, to have care for other humans, other living things, to care for the earth. And as we go through, we will only do one of the great lessons as our focus for tonight, but each great lesson also really looks at the lens of cosmic task, meaning that each thing that's part of the earth, whether it's living or non-living, has, through the moment of creation up till this point of now, has had some purpose to support, to contribute to, or to just continue with the development of where we happen to be now. So everything from the beginning of life and how that one part created something that enabled the next thing that created something that enabled the next thing. Maria Montessori calls that a cosmic task, and as humans, about what our cosmic task is rooted in our peace curriculum.
Okay. So we want to present to you of the 5 great lessons, the creation story tonight. And we're going to do it a little bit differently than what we do with the students. With the students, they see science experiments going throughout the story. We're going to show you pictures of them doing the science lessons throughout the story, both to save time and to give you a feel of what the classroom looks like. Hopefully you can do that extension in your imagination of what it might be like for them. The pictures you are going to see was this year, the upper elementary told the story to lower elementary. So the upper elementary students were doing the science experiments, and they practiced multiple times ahead of time to have it down and try to explain what was happening in it. Unfortunately, I didn't get video shots during it, so it is just still photos. But you will see the gathering of the children and just some of the awe that they experienced while listening to the story.
From a lower elementary perspective, we begin these series of lessons of talking about going into what is the difference between fiction and nonfiction, of how we can have nonfiction stories, that science really are just the stories of our time, of what we've learned so far, and that they will continue to change. And so this is a story, but it's a story that gives us the ideas of what we believe to be true at this point of the universe. And so that is the first lesson. And the lower elementary children have already gone through, up to this point, an initial presentation lesson to talk about the Big Bang and the moment of creation. And this story is, kind of touches a little bit on that, but they've already gone more in depth into that part of the story. And then here we are into the actual formation of the Earth.
So it starts out with everything.
The point of this lesson is not that the children walk away with a specific vocabulary set or with a specific concept that they've mastered, but they have a general understanding or a general exposure and experience to this big idea of what it means that we had a universe that wasn't here and now it's here and we have a planet, and that it wasn't here and it was created, and this was the experience of how it happened, if that makes sense.
Hopefully it raises some wonder and some curiosity that then they will be triggered to go and learn more about.
And yeah, so the process is that we read the story, and then there's a series of experiments that go along with the story, which, as Rita said this year, the upper L children did the experiments, and you'll see the pictures of them. But if you were a student here, you'd be seeing all of these experiments live. And then afterwards, especially in the lower elementary, who they are still at the beginning stages, and they hear the same story every year for 6 years. And that's very purposeful and intentional as well. And then we debrief and have a chance to talk about it. They always have so many questions, and then that will branch into all the other things that we do.
It's really interesting on how their comments and questions differ over the years as they say, oh yeah, I remember that part, that's when this happens because of, and they start really thinking about the science behind it over the years. Where the first time they're just listening to a story, and then they start trying to analyze it a little bit more over the years. Shall we get going on the
Yes.
story?
All right,
Okay.
so here's this year's version of the story. Let's take a trip back in time. Way back before your mother was born. Before your grandfather was born. Even before your grandmother's grandmother was born. Now let's go even further back. To a time before there were any people. There were no animals, no plants, no life at all. There were no living things anywhere. It was a long time ago, and there was nothing. Nothing. No stars, no mountains, no earth, nothing. There was only a great space which had no beginning and no end. It was dark and cold. It was so dark, not even a single spark of light existed in the universe. It was colder than the coldest ice you've ever felt. It was dark, cold, and silent. There were no sounds, just silence. But there was something in the midst of this darkness, something that was not seen, but had a force. A force which drew things together. Teeny tiny particles were attracted to one another. And because they had to follow the law of particles, as more particles were attracted to one another, they pulled together. There were particles like dust, hydrogen particles drifting in the loneliness and emptiness of space. When enough particles joined this force to pull together, they pulled stronger and stronger, and eventually they crashed into each other. And this attractive force, bringing the particles together, makes the magic which brought forth a universe of stars. At some moment, the particles united and a great light appeared. This light was greater than we can imagine. It was radiant, full of heat. It contained everything in the universe. It was so hot, everything was gas. Iron was gas, gold was gas. This fiery cloud of energy expanded and grew. This cloud of light and heat moved, leaving drops of matter in its path. Like water spilling from a glass, some drops held together, while others broke away. These countless drops of water, specks of sand, filled the newly created space with stars and with planets that we see in the sky.
And someone just sprinkled some sand on black paper as to represent the sprinkling of these particles.
Some of the particles formed large masses, large enough to eventually be called planets. The third planet out from this great light source, the sun, became a very special planet, Earth. We may think planet Earth is large, but compared to the sun, it's actually tiny.
Not here.
And so we also have, there are 6, I think, charts that also, large charts that go with this to show some of these concepts. So one is the relative size of the sun and size of the earth. These newly formed entities were moving away from each other in pathways, so they will never meet. Today, they continue to move further apart every second.
They're blowing up a balloon to spread the stars further apart from one another.
They are so far away. It takes the light that they emit millions of years to reach us. Light travels fast. Do you know how fast? 100 miles an hour? 200 miles an hour? 1,000 miles an hour? No, much faster. Light travels 186,000 miles per second. That means in 1 second, a beam of light could travel around the entire Earth 7 times. And here is my children. And they take an actual flashlight and they click it real quick in 1 second. The Earth is about 25,000 miles. So, if you drive 100 miles per hour all day and all night, no stops, it would take more than 10 days to circle the Earth. Yet light can make the trip 7 times in 1 second. So think about how far away some of the stars are in the sky. Their light takes 1 million years to reach us. Also, scientists have calculated that there are so many stars that if each star was a grain of sand, they would cover the entire state of Massachusetts. This pile of stars would be more than a half a mile deep.
So they took a map of Massachusetts and they sprinkled the sand on it to see if it would cover it.
One of these grains of sand is the sun. And 1/1,000,000th of 1 grain is the Earth.
See that tiny speck underneath the E on the right-hand side? That's Earth.
We are just a tiny speck in this ever-expanding universe. The sun doesn't look so big to us, but that's because it's so far away. It is 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth. Particles existed everywhere. They were scattered, and over time, these balls of gases rotated in space and began to cool. Some particles united, and others moved away from one another.
So the students literally took some glitter and sprinkled it onto this bowl of water and watched the particles be attracted or repelled from one another.
Earth was forming, and it formed from really hot gases as it moved towards one another. So the surface must have been boiling lava and molten. There was no soil, no life, no water. Molten iron sank to the center, while less dense minerals such as mica, quartz, feldspar, and feldspar formed the mantle. The surface was basalt with some granite floating along and volcanoes erupting everywhere. According to the law of matter, heavy things sink and light things float. So as the Earth cooled, the heavier things sank deeper to the center of the Earth and the lighter things floated to the surface. We also know heat rises. So heat rises from the hot surface of the Earth.
So one of the experiments that the students do is about heavy things sink. So they take a bowl of sand and some ping pong balls and some washers and bury the ping pong balls in the sand and bury the washers, and then they shake the bowl a little bit and the ping pong balls rise to the top and the washers sink to the bottom to really show them what is happening, how things sink and some things float. That one's hard to see.
Yeah, this is one of the favorite experiments too.
This is molasses, oil, and water. And again, they take 3 different things, and I need a better picture. The picture on the left shows them separate in the 3 test tubes. And on the right, after they're poured together, they watch and see how they settle out. And with the molasses sinking, of course, and the oil on top. Okay, and so that too shows how heavy things sink and lighter things float.
everywhere. They were scattered. But over time, these balls of gases rotated in space and began to cool. Some particles,
No, you're fine.
we already know that part.
Yep,
Okay.
keep going.
Alright, the gases in the atmosphere also cooled and descended to Earth again. A cycle, or dance, was forming between the Earth and the atmosphere. As Earth was cooling, there were volcanoes erupting and releasing heat. The hot interior would bubble up and burst through the newly formed surface of the Earth.
And of course, we do an erupting volcano. A big highlight,
Yes.
huge highlight. More, add more vinegar.
This created clouds of ash, which created shade for the Earth and captured moisture high in the sky. These clouds of moisture helped to cool Earth even more. Eventually, a raindrop fell towards Earth. It surely evaporated before reaching Earth, as Earth was so hot. But eventually, after more cooling, a raindrop reached Earth. It must have taken millions of years, and water cooled the Earth even more.
That is the picture of water on the right.
Particles became solids, liquids, or remaining gases, depending on the temperature. And there was different weights too. The stars, which were huge, much larger than the Earth, are still balls of fire today.
So here we have the three states of matter, the solid, the liquid, and the gas, and we demonstrate that with water. And then looking at the melting points of the different things, they're on a heat source, and they do the crayon, an ice cube, and a piece of solder. And check to see, well, how long does it take for different things to melt? Well, the ice cube goes first, then the crayon melts and makes a mess, and then eventually the solder starts to soften, but it takes much, much longer.
As Earth and its atmosphere continued to cool, moisture was squeezed out of everything, and eventually the Earth formed a crust.
This is a fun one. We demonstrate it with milk or cream, and you cook it. And so the moisture is coming out and turns into water vapor and gas. But then what's left in the pan is a thick layer that's forming the crust. And so this is one where we were cooking it on the right-hand side, but it still has some air up underneath it. Then afterwards, the student picked it up and saw, ooh, it's like all gooey, this stuff on top. And so that's the crust forming, just like it did on Earth.
The water stayed and collected in the holes on Earth, forming lakes, rivers, and oceans. Volcanoes jutted out of the seas, forming islands. There was no soil, no plants, no animals, no life. There was volcanic rock and warm water, a place which was prepared, so eventually life could begin.
And we use an apple that was cooked to show how rivers and valleys and mountains can be formed on Earth with the change as heat is released, because that skin of the apple forms a crust, but there's still the varying landforms. And so water could easily fill in those different pockets. And we do that with the kids as well.
And so at this point, this is the end of the impressionistic story. And this year, the lower elementary children sat with the upper elementary children, had a chance to go look closer at all of the experiments, to talk with them about it, to ask them questions. And then we went back into the classroom and then just talked together. And then that's where all of the questions start coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And especially my favorite kind of questions, which are the ones that I can't answer. Right? They ask them big questions. And that's why Maria Montessori had felt that this was important as the foundation of the curriculum, because the children are starting to ask themselves those things. So let's talk about it of the lens of from them trying to figure that out and to be the center of the investigation of all of these things. So that's just the very first lesson. It's a story, and then everything else that we do comes through this. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. Is there's absolutely no way we could talk about all of it. So we had to pick like one lens, and so we're going to use it with the geography curriculum, right? So we're creating the formation of the Earth, and traditionally when we think of geography, we think of physical geography, right? Land forms, water forms, what the surface of the Earth is like, you know, the continents, all of those types of things. And but in our Montessori lens of cosmic education, we can use geography really as one way to look at how everything is a spiral. And so that's sort of the track we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. So we'll start with lower elementary, and then we'll see how this one idea starts from the first level through the third level, and then up into the fourth, fifth, and sixth level, all with the same lens and perspective. So in the very beginning of the year, with our first year students, some of the very, very first lessons that we have is about what is a biome. And biome is just one word. You know, there's other words you could use like habitat that are similar, but the idea is that a biome is a specific place on the Earth that is made up of the climate, which includes the heat and energy from the sun, the precipitation. So we have energy, water, the air, which will depend on the elevation or where specifically it is on the Earth. Then all of those things make up sort of the climate, and then what are the specific plants and animals and soil that are supported within that climate. And so by taking that as our very beginning lens of what is a biome, we jump right into, in the first few days of school, what is just a creation that has happened through the time I've had with the children here, that we've created this thing called the biome game. And so through the biome game, we start to look at these different, here you can go back for a second, these different biomes. So here this is just talking about, it's hard to see in the pictures, you know, the details, but what is a biome, and then what the biome's created with, and then they look at the different types of biomes. So, you know, those are very familiar to most of us, things like a desert, they all know desert, they all know, they usually are able to tell me desert, they're usually able to tell me rainforest, and then we have a whole conversation about how a rainforest, there's two different types of forest. But we go through the different types of biome. So ocean, mountains, wetlands, grasslands, tropical forest, temperate forest.
There's 7 of them. There's 7
And so once we have that as the very most basic knowledge of understanding, then we travel into the continent of study. Now this goes from both lower elementary and upper elementary. We take in the 3-year cycle, since the children are in each level for 3 years, we've taken all of the continents and divided them up along those 3 years. So right now, in the school, the elementary program is studying South America. So we will travel into South American biome. We'll pick one of them. In the lower elementary, this year we started with the wetlands, and then jumped into the biome game. So the biome game really is a way to teach them fundamental, basic Montessori skills, both through the lens of academics and from the lens of the whole child perspective. So the biome game is based on a card set of materials that we have. So if we're starting in the South American wetlands, so we're looking simultaneously, where are the South American wetlands located within the continent of South America? We're looking at maps, and we'll go into map skills later. But in the first part is just what does it mean to gather information? So we have these card set materials, and the children are responsible, depending on their age and their experience level, to read or listen to the information about these specific biomes. So the biomes, we begin with the plants and animals, and it's all by the 5 classes of animals. So there's a fish, amphibian, reptile, bird, and mammal, and there is a plant, and there's always an invertebrate. And so the older students are reading to the younger students, and even before the beginning of the first day of school, when we have time where the different new students or returning students have a chance to come to the classroom, we're prepping them and building them up for this first experience together. So the returning students are learning about what does it mean to be helping to share information and reading together. And then the new students are learning about that that reading isn't just like a card set of material isn't like, oh, I can't read it yet, is totally legit. There's a lot of high level vocabulary, but that reading and listening are 2 skills that complement each other. It doesn't matter if you're reading to someone or someone's reading to you, that it's a thinking work. The materials are self-correcting, which most Montessori materials, especially in the elementary level, are designed that way. So the children are learning independence for that it's not just an adult who's telling them if it's right or if it's wrong, but the idea is that they are able to do that themselves. And then as they are reading the information cards, the very beginning of oral presentations is what does it mean to share something that you've been learning about? So what that looks like in the very beginning is it's adult-led, and we're speaking with the kids and asking them to talk with us. But then within the course of the biome game, then they start doing this with each other. So the way that the biome game works is that we'll take a continent, we'll take a biome, and then we'll start with a limited number. So it might be 2 or 3 we'll say animals. And so the children work together to learn about a specific animal that lives in this biome, in this continent. Rita, did you grab those cards?
Yeah.
Oh, they get
I can
passed
grab.
around. Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Grab them.
No.
You're good.
Stay with it.
And so
No, go right ahead.
with the lower elementary, to help them start to conceptualize. Oh, okay.
It's desert, but whatever.
Yep, so these boxes have an introduction of what that biome is like in that particular continent, and then they have a specific animal or plant that are located there with names and descriptions. And so the lower elementary children will then take that knowledge and immediately begin to create their first piece of follow-up work, and which is the biome game. So they're taking information and they have to figure out how can I, through imaginative play, create something about this animal within the context of this biome. And so follow-up work is very much a part of Montessori curriculum, in the sense where our job is not to just be the dispenser of information. We live in an age now where memorization of many things is not really required of us. It's learning what do I do with it, and learning what part of it interests me, or how can I apply it to something else.
Where do you find the answers?
Right, exactly. And so through this, they start to really, okay, so I've learned this piece, but what is it that I can do with it? How can I dig deeper? How can I understand it more? And so the first thing they create this game where maybe we have predator and prey, and they start to investigate that relationship, which they enjoy acting out, right? Because it's a very physical experience. They're running, they're chasing each other, and then in the very beginning, it really is working together of what does it mean in if this was an actual biome. What would be the balance between how many predators and how many prey? Or what would happen if you were a predator? Are you really just going to be eating, 6 things all at once? What would that look like? What is another part of your experience? And so they start to take what they've learned, and there's very detailed information about these animals written on these, or plants, on these cards. And so the point is that whatever it is that they're doing in their imaginary play, it has to be within the context of real information. And so if they have an animal that that hops, right? So then their body movements have to take that on. And so they're doing their first piece of research work, is taking this information and learning about these animals, while also creating within our play space of, okay, well, this is no longer a play structure. What does this mean? So if we're studying the wetlands, okay, well, what are the different parts of the wetlands? So there might be a river, there might be a pond, there might be a marshy area. And so they work together using actual coordinates of where north, south, east, and west is within the building, and create a 3-dimensional map of their play area for which to then act out all of these things that are going on in the biome. And then this is really powerful because it's not just geography concepts. We're not just talking about a continent. It's not just biology concepts, and we're not just talking about what are the characteristics of these animals or plants that are happening within their imaginary play. Can you go back? Thank you. But it is also a huge part of what does it mean to be a group. And that is, again, coming back to that cosmic place of what do we, as a human, we're not just an isolated person, that we are all here together. And so in the beginning, this is really helping our new students learn what does it mean to ask for help, and helping our returning students what does it mean to be a helper. And they've both had lessons to introduce them to be prepared for that. And then a big part of it is that we don't tell them what the rules are of this game, is they have to decide together, and that changes and evolves as they try something and it doesn't work. Or we'll throw something in there like, okay, today you're all being the same animal. So then what does that look like as a whole community of this animal versus you have the different biodiversity of who's eating someone or who's over here doing their own thing. So that is really a part of it too, is to help them to be able to navigate in a group, and what does it mean to make up the rules for this experience. Another big important thing is, like I mentioned before, is when they are taking on these animals, or later on we introduce the humans who live here as well, is that it has to be accurate to the information that we have. And so we talk about perspective taking of, if you were this animal, what would it be like with your movements? What would it be like with your, like what area would you live in? Or, who would you be near or not near? Or, what time of day? Or, all these types of things of really help is the very first step of purposefully teaching them to think about through the lens of something else. And then, of course, learning all of these animal movements is really beneficial for them, not just because it's fun, but it helps them, it becomes some of our regulation tools for when we are then looking at specific social emotions. So then, beyond the biome game outside, right, a whole lot packed into like one experience that we do consistently outside in the beginning of the day. This biome materials and lens takes us through a good majority of the rest of our curriculum. So with our reading work, one of our materials is called the Biome Readers, which are here. And they are leveled text for beginning readers. And it takes them through we have several sets of cards for each biome in each continent. So in South America, they have different, it's a tiny little booklet, and it has just the isolated pictures and just the isolated text. And through that we work on decoding skills, but just basic reading skills, but then it becomes the next level of comprehension skills, which is sequencing. Because you have the pictures isolated, then they close the book and see if they can recall what they have read. and by putting the pictures in order. And then it's self-correcting because they have the book and they have the answers on the back. So that's in the beginning of our reading curriculum. And then as the children become more advanced, the older kids work with these particular parts. And if you have a chance at some point tonight, if you haven't seen them before, there are a lot of high-level vocabulary on here, and that's purposeful. Is A, to give them the real words, right? To give them the vocabulary that really matches the information, but also to provide them with opportunities for research. As Rita had mentioned, right, it's about how do we gain information, where do we find it if there's something that we want to know that we're not sure about. And so in the lower elementary classroom, that begins with using dictionaries, with using atlases, and then that ties right into our word study, some of our beginning word study lessons, which are alphabetical order, which then leads into guide words, which gives them a very structured approach at using a dictionary. And we still use paper dictionaries, which of course you can just find anything online quickly, but it's more about the organization of information. Are they able to conceptually understand how it's all organized? So just pulling out a couple of things. In the past 2 years, this is sort of how we've tied writing in with our biome studies. So in narrative writing, we learned about the parts of the story. All the lower elementary children have been working on this already so far this year. And so in the beginning, especially for our earliest writers, it's very hard for them to come up with these parts. Oh, I'm just going to write a story. I don't know what to write about. And so we break it up into these parts. And then these right here, the biome can provide the frame from within they can pull that. So, so the setting, so if we're studying the mountains, it could just be mountains in general. It could be a specific mountain range that they found through their research. It could be the mountain, a specific mountain that has been mentioned in the other part materials. And then, of course, the characters can be the humans or the animals or the plants that they have also been learning about and acting out first outside in the biome game. So they have already had a physical, experiential way to process this information in a different sensory format to then translate that into writing. Last year, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, both years we did picturing writing, and one of them we specifically focused on looking at the land and water forms, which is, we'll talk more about in a few moments, but that ties into this geography curriculum of the biomes because the biome is located in a specific area of South America, and then they will study the land and water forms. And so they did a whole year-long unit on learning the different land and water forms and then being able to write stories through that. And then some other types of writing that we'll do is nonfiction writing, writing summaries, and research that they are learning from the different pieces of information. History and culture. This is like very recent. Those of you who have children in the lower elementary class right now, you can ask them about this because I think this was last week. So this is the people who live in the mountains of South America, and it talks about their fundamental needs. It's a big part of the lower elementary history curriculum, where we look at how humans have met their needs, both now and throughout history. And so the biome materials helps us to look at that not just as an isolated thing, but within the context of the continent that we're studying, the biome that we're studying. And so we were just learning about how the people who live in the Andes Mountains have houses with thatch roofs. So we did a whole thing with that, which then we brought back outside and created into the biome game, where they're acting out, figuring out, well, who's gonna harvest the grass, and who's going to be the ones who tie it into the bundles, and who are going to be the ones who are attaching it to the roof, and who's going to be the ones calculating about how many bundles we need. And so they had a chance to act all of that out outside. So as I mentioned before, physical geography is a really easy tie-in, right, to not only just this biome curriculum, but the whole idea of the creation of the earth. Is the earth was created, and what is that, the surface of the earth actually look like? So in lower elementary, we begin with, I have a hand-painted material, but it's similar to this, of nesting boxes to help them understand where in the universe that they fit in. So we just had this big story about the creation of the universe, and then within the universe, how the Earth was created. And that inside of the category of the Earth, it's divided up into continents. And then within each continent, it's further divided up into countries. And then where we live, the countries are divided up into states. And then the state is divided up into towns and cities. And then there's a specific location and address to say, I am right here. So that is like the beginning concept. And from that, then we can, well, let's go back out. So from us to a city, to a state, to a country, and they start making maps in these different levels of the classification of geography. And so then we are now in South America, so we've done continents. Now in South America, they have done created maps with the different countries of South America. We also have a lot of geography songs. Any returning parents know all about these geography songs. But what's really neat about it is when we go through and learn the geography songs, for the most part, by the end of their time here with us, they know the name of every single country in the world, which is pretty cool.
Through song.
Yeah, through songs. And then, if you want to go to the next one, I think it has a picture of this. So this shows you a bit, these are actually our students working on with these materials. So we have them first start with, this is when we did Africa, it looks like.
Yeah.
So they create a puzzle map, which is a crossover from the Children's House, but it is no longer just about fine motor skills where they're tracing and also learning some of the names, but then it becomes a research work. And so they have the political countries traced out, and that would, I'm not sure if you can see in that picture or not, but the next step is to then take our biome maps and to color it not by political anymore, by the countries, but to color the biomes on top, so that you can see where the countries are. Each country has what types of biomes inside of them. And there's many, 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 many lessons I don't have time to talk about tonight, but about how we go from drawing the map into creating a biome map. And then after that, our third years right now are pretty excited because they have taken their maps, they've colored the biomes, they have researched the land and water forms as well. So, you know, the islands, the major lakes, the chains of mountains, the bays, the capes, all of the things within that particular continent. And then their studies in physical and political geography are even more detailed because they start to create pin maps, where they are looking at making pins for the country capitals. And then what they're going to do, we have one student who has finished that and is going to start working on the flags of each country as well. And then, you know, just a brief overview for how biology is also so very much involved in this. Obviously, we're talking about the plants and the animals within each of these biomes, within each continent. And so from that, we look into classification of what this here is a first year lesson looking at the kingdoms of life. And then as they go through that, in the second year, they look at classifying the 5 classes of animals. And then in the third year, they get much more in depth where they look at, within each kingdom, we usually get to animals, sometimes plants, looking at the phylum for each one, and then doing a lot of research work. And so there's just actual biology lessons where they're learning about the parts of animals, they're learning about the body functions of animals, they're learning about the life cycles of animals, what are the defining characteristics of what has an animal to be in a certain classification or a certain class and what doesn't. But then a really big part of this, and the reason why using biomes is such a powerful tool, is because, okay, we're talking about a very specific concept in biology. However, because we look at the biome lens, which means the plants, the animals, the soil, the air, the water, the energy. Did I forget one?
No,
Okay. They're all interconnected. So, in the desert, the soil's really sandy. And why is that? Because there's not very many plants and animals, and that is what creates such really rich soil. And so we look at the interconnectedness of all of these things, as well as what plants and animals need to do to be able to live within a specific biome, and then what is our role as humans within that biome. So not just studying the people who live there, but all of us as stewards of the earth. And since we see how interconnected all the parts of the biome are, well, what happens when we change something like the energy, right? We have more solar energy, or we change something like the air, or we change something, right? So we start to talk about pollution, we start to talk about climate change, we start to talk about deforestation, and what their role is in their cosmic task in the biomes is to be the stewards and the caretakers of all of that. That was a lot of information.
And they take it seriously.
They do.
They really do. So, geography continues. Obviously, it doesn't come to a dead stop and then we start all over. It continues with the upper elementary. All right. Some of the tasks are repeated. The political maps of the different countries, the biomes and where they lie in the different countries, all that comes into play again, and they do it so much faster. The biome map, they usually do in one sitting. They do it much quicker, and their hand and motor skills are getting refined even more so, but they still need that practice. It's not like it just ends. They start to look at it with a different lens. They start to look at it in more detail. Oh, I've heard of this city before. Oh, why is this the capital and not this other city I heard of in that country? And they start questioning things. It's really fun. And so then they asked me, and I said, oh, why don't you research that and share the information with all of us? And that's a very common line that I use, because I tell them, I do not know about everything. I can't know all the details of all your questions. I know some of them, and some I will share. But others, they go and they look up and they come back with so much information and they feel proud about it. And sometimes we just sit and the people are just sharing information that they found out. And it's good for them to be able to share the information that they are learning with their fellow students. Because everybody learns even more then. And then they start feeding off each other. Oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to go look this up. Oh, I'm going to go look that up. And part of what we start off with is the number of resources we have. We have lots of books. You'll see lots of books. You'll see books, I think, on every single shelf in this room. And we have a lot of shelves in this room. But they are sorted with different categories. We do have computers that they use as well, a lot of Chromebooks. But we say go to the books first. And again, it goes back to the organization of the information. Because when you're looking at the information on the screen, you're not always sure where it came from. Or what's this a part of? Is this a subset of something? But in the books, it's typically outlined that way. And so that is still very, very helpful. They do lots of research with their curiosity. And they look at tasks associated with all of the biomes and look at the different continents. We do require a little bit more in depth in Upper L, as you would expect. We cover all of the biomes in each continent that we're studying, and the continent is by semester. And in addition to just reading the cards and learning what's there, sometimes I say, well, what's different between the wetlands and the desert? Well, go learn it and tell me what's different. Why is this in the desert? Why can't this live in the wetlands? And they go and then figure it out. They write down, they do a little written report, they have a choice. They can draw a picture and write 5 worthwhile sentences. Lame sentences are not accepted. They have to be descriptive sentences. Or they could write 10 descriptive sentences. 5 and draw a picture, or 10. And then they have 3 minutes to give an oral presentation on their information on a day when they have not looked at any of the biome cards. And they feel so proud when they have done that and accomplished it. And this year it's really interesting. I have some that say, no, I'm doing all my writtens and then I'm going to start presenting you. my orals. And so then they're keeping them all straight in their heads. It's amazing what they can do. Others are going through and do the written, and the following day they'll give you the oral. Then they'll start another biome and move on. But it's interesting because they're keeping straight what is in which biome. And I tell the students to try to help them remember things. Think of a picture. Think of what it looks like in that biome. Put yourself in there as one of the animals and look and say, all right, what are you eating? What do you need to be on the lookout for? And try to just picture it. And then they start telling you the whole story going around with this whole biome. It's really quite fascinating. And everyone's story is just a little bit different, which makes sense because they're all unique students. So that's really kind of cool. There are research forums that they do above and beyond. These cards, they've read these cards. Okay, we've got it. But then they say, well, what about this animal? What about this plant? So we do have research forums to help give them guidelines so they can go and research more about every single biome. So they're pretty busy. And so these are just some students doing some more of the biome work, and you see they're laying it all out, they're reading through, they're looking at what's different, and work continues. This is an example of someone giving their presentation. You'll have to just give it to one person because otherwise everyone's going to hear a biome so many times. And they do practice with their peers. They want to practice before they present it to an adult. And this is an example of a write-up, of persons writing things up and drawing pictures to go along with what they see in the biome. Again, in upper elementary, they continue with the map making, like I said. So this is an example of a pin map on the left, where the person did all the capitals and the country names. We also do the flags and the land and water forms and any major landmarks. They keep adding in more and more things all on their own. I don't even have to say, hey, what are you going to do next? Oh, I'm going to go find a landmark in each area, each region of this continent. And so then they start flagging up the landmarks. So they're researching it. What you see on the right is a collaboration map. We started this due to COVID and we're continuing it forever because it's important, especially at this age. They want to do things together. They don't want to do all their work alone. They want to work with one another. And so we started these collaboration maps where we blow up the outline of the puzzle map and it's blank. They have to figure out what country it is, where does it belong, what's its capital, what's its flag look like, why is it important, why did it become a country, what are any special landmarks. And it's over here on the wall, and the kids are like awestruck. They're so proud of it, that they've got information about every country in South America that different people have researched, and they put all their information together and be compiled as one. And these are some fourth-year students and one older student there. And I was listening to them just talk. And they were talking all about it. And they're like, oh, but look over in this country. This country goes for, I don't know, makes chocolate or whatever they were saying. And over here, this is going on. Look at the information here. They're looking at it. They're looking at what other people researched and they're learning from. And they're just like, this is so cool. Look at what's going on over here. So again, it's something they're proud of. They wanted it hanging up there. So they put it together. And that's their collaboration map. Examples of their biome maps. 3 people have finished their biome maps, which means they have completed all their biomes and their biome presentations and their biome writing, because that's when they create their biome maps. And they do happen pretty fast. The biome map itself does not take them long at this age. Very different than in the earlier years.
Yeah, lower elementary.
Very
it takes
different.
most of them the whole semester to create it.
Right. And the biome map, they do it in one morning, basically, the map itself, which makes sense. They've got those fine motor skills. They know what they're working on, and they don't want to waste their time just creating the map. They're looking for information to go along with it.
Right, about natural resources or population or the currency of that country.
Right, imports, exports. They're going on all of that. You can flip it. I don't know what's next. Oh, this is another example of a biome map. This student decided to put information that they researched about all the different biomes. They wanted to have a picture to go with each biome, and so they added all of that right onto their biome map, getting into more details. Again, flip again, latitude and longitude comes right out of map studies. Who created these maps? Who are those cartographers? How do we read them? And so we have a nice material where you have to read the latitudes and longitudes and put the world map together. And this is a student working on that. It's actually kind of fun. Okay, moving right along. So here they're writing observations that they made. We had stations set up around the room, looking at what's different between this and this. Because often in the biomes they are comparing. They're comparing what's different between the wetlands and the desert, or the temperate forest and the tropical forest. And so we are practicing looking at common things that we see all the time and saying, well, what's different about these two things? What are you noticing? What are those details? And so we had stations around the room for them to go and practice and write down their observations, comparing two or more things. We also, people are saying, why is it like this? Well, it eroded. The wind, the water. Well, what caused that? And so we get off into science experiments. And so here's students doing different science experiments. And again, we set up stations around the room. So when they came in from recess one day, the room was a science lab. And they got cards and they went over and studied their card, looked at what all their materials were. All right, do we know what's going on here? They figured it out, and then their job was to do this science experiment and demonstrate it and explain it to the rest of the class. So I think we had 6 different stations set up. And so this is what they were doing here. And so they're saying, hey, that candle it went out because it lost its oxygen. It needed oxygen to keep burning. And the other one's a siphon going with the balloon and the weight. And here's more experiments going on, because can you get the ping pong ball out of the jar with different forces? And the fact that air has weight are the balloons on the right. That's a string hanging from up above. Yes, we use this string going across for different things. So we had it hanging down, and they were trying to balance and say, well, if I take the balloon off of here, why does the other side go up? Well, I guess air has weight because everything else was the same. And so they were trying different size balloons to see if it mattered. Okay. Another thing we did, a takeoff of the biomes. Last spring, we were studying Oceania. Okay, I had to remember which continent we were doing. And we were looking at traveling. They know I like to travel, so they tease me and ask me about different things. That I've never been to Oceania. So, make a trip. Let's go. So they created it. We gave them a budget. They had to calculate how to get there. Where were they going to stay? What were they going to do when they were there? What did they want to do? And they all came up with these travel itineraries. Some of them sound fantastic. I want to do them. But what was interesting, some of them ran out of gas. They forgot to have any money to fill the fuel in the car's gas tank that they rented. So they're like, oh, I got to think about that too. So forecasting and really thinking about the details of what's involved was very interesting. And I know some have created some trips now in North America that they're hoping their families will take, because they said that might be more realistic. But the overall itinerary brought in so many things. Well, what do you want to do when you go there? One person just wanted to go fishing. You know, another person was, oh, I'm going here, then I want to go here, then I'm going here. Boy, you're spending an awful lot of time flying around from place to place. Are you ever going to relax?
I remember asking one student, are you ever going to sleep?
Right. They're like, no, I have to get here by 3, then I got to catch a 5 o'clock flight, so I have to go, you know. They were on the go. But it was a great planning process. They learned so much from it. And, you know, they're sitting there with their money watching, you know, looking at their accounting sheet and saying, uh-oh, I'm out of money. Well, what are you going to do, you know?
They also calculated American dollars to the currency.
Yes, they had to convert. They had to do the conversion to figure things out. But that's another takeoff from biomes, from our geography. What are you going to do with this information? You know, It's also, you can get into the recycling and, you know, they're like, no, we have to take care of Mother Earth. Okay, well, what are we gonna do? We're doing the film plastic recycling. And we're still doing that, by the way. I want clean film plastic, as, we give it to Trex, and Trex recycles it and makes plastic wood. But they're just like, what can we do for our part to try to help the Earth so that it's still in good shape for the rest of us, for years to come. Also books that we read. We pull in literature. So The Boy of the Painted Cave, we read that when we were studying Europe, because it takes place in France in ancient times. But I mean, we try to bring in our geography with what we are reading. The Eyes of the Pharaoh takes place in Africa, in Egypt specifically, and another historical fiction book. We read books about Argentina, Brazil, Machu Picchu, the solar system, Yanomami, which are indigenous people in South America. Okay, they're in the Amazon rainforest, is where they're living, still there today. And we just started a book last week called The Explorer. I think the children are going to love it. It's taking place in South America.
They already want to write a play.
On The Explorer?
Yes.
Okay.
They were only
They've only heard a couple
They've only
of
32
chapters.
pages in the book.
The books all came in today, so they will be through. So we just bought a book so that they can each be reading, and then we'll have discussions about different points on it. So we try to bring in our literature into our geography. So for United Nations Day, we did a whole unit leading up to it this year about human migration. Because once this earth was prepared for life, then we did the Timeline of Life story earlier in the year. And this year we really did a lot of focus on the coming of humans. And we looked at, where are we from? Where did we come from? Where did my ancestors come from? Where did your ancestors come from? And your ancestors come from? And it was fascinating. The children learned so much that I think they'll have for the rest of their lives, information about their ancestors. And we asked them, don't just find the data. You can ask mom and dad, you can ask your grandparents, you can ask a family friend about anything. But we asked them, how do you feel? Ask the people, how do they feel? How did they feel that first time they saw a snowflake or felt that cold snow? And then the students started really getting into it more so, and they're just like, they were afraid. Or they weren't sure what to think at first. How were they treated, when they came to the country? Because everybody ended up here in our classroom, but where did their ancestors come from? They came from all over the world, is what we found out. We don't have anyone from Oceania, but we have someone, a full United Nations experience, because United Nations this year was looking at diversity. And everyone began to realize and become more aware of our community and how diverse we are, just in our upper elementary classroom. And that awareness and the acceptance of one another is what brings peace to the world. And so, like Maria Montessori said, the way to get peace is educate the child. Let them know that everybody is okay and accept everyone for who they are. And so we're teaching that through all of our studies, through our geography, through our math, through our science, through our history, our literature, all the language, in so many ways. And that is cosmic education. And that's what we are trying to offer all the children that come into our classrooms, is this cosmic education. Anything else?
I don't know, is there another slide? Yep, there you go.
It says thank you. So if you do have any further questions, or if you have some suggestions for us, we're always open to more ideas and feedback on how we can improve things for these wonderful young humans that come our way. Because we truly enjoy what we're doing, and we enjoy spending time with these young humans. They make me, they make me learn something every single day. They are amazing. The things that they ask, their curiosity, And if we can get that love of learning to stay in them, then they are set for life. My main goal is to have them love learning. If they can love to learn, there's no worries. They will continue learning for the rest of their life. And that's what we hope.
So thank you very much. This was just one tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction. But we had to pick a track to try and walk you through how Maria Montessori takes the big idea and then it becomes the container through which we teach everything else. So thank you for coming.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Anything you want to ask? Oh, if you were our students out there, your hands would all be up.
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
It's very nice presentation. So what are the major difference or between those curriculum and the regular
And the
curriculum
traditional?
in the traditional public school like that?
Lots of
A
differences.
lot. That was my first answer.
There are lots of differences. The fact that we try pretty much go out of our way to make sure that students follow this interconnectedness between the different academic disciplines is very different. Instead of, all right, let's all sit down and do the math now, we're gonna ignore everything you learned in geography. I try to do word problems and present them with word problems that are related to things that we're studying. So I have regular word problem packets, but then I bring out other ones that, if we're studying rainfall, well, guess what? All the word problems are gonna have to do with rainfall, just because it gets them to look at it from another perspective. In traditional education, there are no connections.
Right, it's the
They're kept as
small
separate pods.
piece and hoping that eventually the children will have a way to put it together. And we go the other way. We give them the whole picture and show them how it fits together.
Right. And then they may come up with a passion as they get older, and they may, study down that passion line of interest to their heart's content. And that's perfectly fine, but they have the well-roundedness. So we're giving them that broader foundation for them to grow and be exposed to, because they're capable.
And I think there's two other really important points of how Montessori education is different in terms of the lens of your question. One of them is that, as we said in the beginning, the idea of cosmic education is to teach about the whole experience of being human. So that includes not just academics. That includes what is held within the lens of peace curriculum. That includes what does it mean to be awareness of yourself. We do a lot of, especially in lower elementary, emotional vocabulary. We're learning regulation tools. We're learning conflict resolution, right? So we're teaching them beyond the academics, but it all fits together with the academics as one piece. That is the structures through which we teach other things. And the other thing I would say is that Maria Montessori truly believed that children are so much more capable than we give them credit for. And so here we give them credit, and we give them the chance to experiment, to try, to fail and try again with support. And because of that, they almost always have way larger skill set within the frame of academics. With the materials, going from a concrete to an abstract idea, they don't have to be able to abstractly understand something in the beginning, and they work through that series of lessons until they are abstract. And because everything is connected, and because of what I just said, they create so much deeper learning, and they're able to go into things that are way higher. Like, I love telling the third years, they love this. Every time we start beginning like the classification of the phyla of the animal kingdom, like, most people don't learn this until they're like in middle school or high school, and they're like, oh, they get so excited, right? But it's true, right? But they're ready for that. They've already done so much deep work in the first 2 years. Well, that's what comes next. And because we have the materials, it's concrete, it's visual, they're able to access higher level.
We have fourth years doing geometric proofs. They don't know they're doing geometric proofs. They think they're just proving that this is equivalent to this, which is what they're doing, but that is this is equivalent to this because the bases are the same and the heights are the same. or because this base is the same and it's half the height of that. And they're proving through polygons equivalencies,
Through the materials.
all through materials, but that is geometric proofs that they tend to learn in sophomore year in high school. But they are getting a foundation on that right now. And the understanding, know the difference between what is equivalent, not equivalent, what is congruency, what is similar. And they're exposed to it. So those words will come back to them and they'll be like, oh yeah, I know that. And I know that for a fact because I've heard from people that have gone through our program and have come back and said, I was able to answer all those questions because I remembered this and this and this. And they feel so proud and happy with themselves that they remembered some of that. They're like, I didn't remember all the pieces, but I remembered the gist of it. And that's very important. And to the other thing that Catherine was just saying, you can't learn if you can't be engaged. So we have to look at the emotional well-being of the person and help them be in a state where they can engage so that they can learn. If they're upset or, and then they're not going to be listening to anything that's going on around them. They're just churning on things that is in their mind at the time. And so we have to help them be able to sort that out and process through it so that they can engage in learning.
And they can recognize that in themselves.
And yes, the reflection piece is huge. So some people say, well, why are you meditating? Why are you taking the time to do this? That takes up the whole 10 minutes of the day. It's because we want them to think about, well, how did your work cycle go? Did it go like you wanted it to? Why or why not? What could you do differently the next time? And those are just things that we want them to be thinking about so that they can be more productive in their learning, no matter what they're doing. And one thing, people sometimes say, oh, well, it's such a small school, they don't have many peers. Well, I know another small school, and an alumni from that small school was asked that question, and she came back and said it was the best thing. I learned how to solve conflict with my fellow students. She then went to a larger school for middle school and said there were so many people there that if you had a problem with another classmate, you just walked away and went and made some new friends. But they don't know how to solve problems. And so when you have a smaller class body, well, you're with this person, sometimes, for 5-8 years, you gotta figure out how to get along with different people.
It's your family.
How to solve those problems, how to work with it. Think about how that could help in some work situations. I used to be a software engineer. How that could help with some work situations if you can't get along with the people you're working with. If you can figure out how to overcome that and get along with people in different situations, you can get a lot more work done. And you can be happier.
And we teach that explicitly. It's not just being in the environment. That's literally part of our curriculum. It's teaching problem solving. We have a whole
Conflict resolution.
Yep.
Right. So that is a big piece of it as well. And you've got to learn how to get along with one another. We're all humans. We're here on this earth. Let's figure it out and let's be at peace with one another.
As you can tell, we have a lot to say about this. We try to keep
It's a good
short.
question.
But one more important piece I feel like is worth mentioning is practical life, right? We don't teach children just to be here in the confines of a school with the lens of academics. We teach children to be humans. So that means, some of it we can't do at school, that we extend learning into home. But what does it mean to care for yourself, to care for your environment, and so all sorts of things like, there's the expectation they learn how to pack their lunch, and at school they're the ones who care for the classroom. They care for the pets. They clean the classroom. They do the mail. They do the lower elementary children learn how to do filing and how to curate their portfolios and how to a lot of being able to break something up into a smaller task. Right, they also learn about practical life of planning. Like Rita talked a lot about planning in terms of that big upper elementary project, but even in the lower elementary of what does it mean to make a plan for your day, and whether or not you're following that plan or completing that plan, how does that match up to what it is that you're working on, all of those kind of practical life skills. that are beyond just the content knowledge.
I'll never forget the day my mom said, I'm not doing any more laundry. And a laundry basket had landed in, I'm one of 7, landed in each one of
From
our
a
rooms.
Montessori parent.
Yes, my mom taught Montessori. And a laundry basket hamper ended up in each of our rooms. There's directions on the cabinet. I was one of the younger ones. If you don't understand what to do, ask an older sibling to help you. And we did our laundry from then on out. And it works. We were capable of doing it. We could follow directions. We could do the laundry. We can fold clothes. If you don't want them doing the machine because you're worried about too much soap going in or something, they could fold the laundry. They can load the dishwasher. They can unload the dishwasher. They can sweep that kitchen floor after, we used to do it every single day. Do dishes. They're humans that are very capable and they want to belong. They want to do things. They might gripe and complain about it. That's normal. But they like the free time that exists afterwards. They like it when you guys are free as well as their parent and can do something with them. And that can only happen if they help out to do some of the stuff that has to get done for the household to run. So the work of the home is what we call it, is very, very important. But that falls at home. We can't do it here at school. If they were living here, it'd be very different. We'd have a whole boarding program going on. But no, they do. But let them do what they are capable of doing. They are very capable humans. They are also clever. They're going to claim, oh, I can't do this. And it may take them longer than it would take you the first 20 times that they do it. But then after that, it's going to get easier and easier. So you have to build in time and schedules. But let them do what they are capable of doing. They will benefit. I have heard, my daughter told me, I taught so many kids how to do laundry at college, it was ridiculous. They had no clue on how to do any laundry. The machines are right there. Washing machine pretty much runs itself. Load it up, put soap in, turn the water on. But a lot of people do not know how to do that. So please, let them do that, because I want them to be the knowledgeable ones out in the world, because they have the power to help things go smoothly in this world. We need to educate that child. Any other questions before I go on another big Well, thank you all for coming. We truly appreciate it. Spread the word. I think that this place is wonderful. Obviously, I'm here. And I do think it's wonderful, and it's a great opportunity for every child that comes in. It really is. And I'm thankful for all of you that have children here. It is wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.